Welcome. In this video we're going to go through the basic steps to install a standard Ubuntu desktop environment within Virtualbox virtualization. You can see I've already got Virtualbox up and running. This assumes that you've already installed Virtualbox successfully and you've had no errors as part of that installation. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to download the Ubuntu distribution as an ISO from Ubuntu itself. You can see I've already landed on the Ubuntu page at ubuntu.com. So we want to go down to the download section, and you have two options. You've got the Ubuntu server and you've got Ubuntu desktop. For this install we're going to use the desktop, and the version at the time of doing this video was 20.04 LTS. For those who aren't aware, LTS stands for long-term support, and they will provide support for that version for 2 years. So we're going to download the ISO, and that's what we're going to install from. So just click OK and save it to wherever you like. You can see I've already downloaded it, so I'm not going to download it again, but you would download yours and have it sitting there ready for the installation. Once you've downloaded it, we'll go back to our Virtualbox desktop manager, and we're going to click on the new button, and the new button will launch a series of wizards that will permit you to specify the type of template in which to use for a basic installation. So we're going to give our Ubuntu install any arbitrary name that you can think of. We'll call ours Ubuntu Lab 2. It's just what I can think of at the moment, and it is just something that is meaningful to you, that you are aware what that environment is for. The machine folder is where the actual virtual machine configuration settings are going to sit. You can change that, but for this installation we're going to go with the defaults. You choose the type of operating system that you are installing. On this instance we will leave it as Linux, but you could choose Windows, Mac OS and a couple of others. And we're going to choose the version, we're going to choose the flavor of Linux to install. There is a number of them there, and this just stipulates the specific pre-built templates for the installation process. So we'll choose Ubuntu 64-bit. We're going to click next. We're going to leave the default memory size, but this is important to give consideration to, because whatever you have in mind for this virtual machine, you may need to bump up the memory to suit. In this instance we're just going to keep it as 1024 megabytes, which is 1 gig. You may need to bump that up to say 4 gig or above, depending upon your needs. We'll click next. We're going to choose to create a new virtual hard drive. We don't have any that we want to use, so we're going to stick with the defaults and go just create. And we have options here about what type of hard drive we want to install. Again, we're going to stay with the default, which is the Virtualbox disk image. And we're again presented with a couple of options about dynamically allocated or fixed size. So dynamically allocated, we can stipulate whatever size we like, but the space will only be allocated as the files consume the space. So we could specify, say, 100 gigabytes, and the installation may only take up 100 megabytes. I'm just making figures up, but this is an example. And the size of the virtual hard drive will only be 100 megabytes, but it would allow it to grow automatically until it reaches the stipulated 100 gigabytes before it would say the disk is full. This allows us to over allocate space for each and every virtual machine, and it's something that's very handy to have, but because you over allocate, if you're not careful, you can quickly run out of disk space if you're not keeping an eye on what you install into your virtual machines. The fixed size option allocates the disk space first up and gives the whole allocated amount. So if you stipulate 100 gig, then it will create a 100 gig file immediately. So for this install, we're going to have it dynamically allocated, and I'm going to stipulate 100 gig because I know it's not going to allocate the 100 gig, but it'll allow me to grow to 100 gig if needs be. Okay, so that's got our Lab 2 install set up. That's the basic installation. There's a few things that we need to go through. So we're going to go through and click settings. Now the first thing is that we want to click on System. We can see the base memory that we've allocated previously as part of the install wizard, but we want to go through and click Processor. At the moment, the default template as part of the wizard is 1 CPU. That's probably not going to be enough for what you want to do, and it will make your virtual machine very, very slow. So on this instance, I've got the CPUs to spare. I'm going to bump that up to 4 CPUs. I'm going to tick enable PAE/NX, which is the physical address extensions, and I'll then go on to display, and I'm going to bump up the video memory to 128 megabytes, and I'm going to click storage and make sure that I've got an empty CD drive there. If you haven't, then you'll need to add one via here, adds a new storage controller, or adds a new storage attachment. One of those will give you the empty hard drive, but for this template it's given us that empty CD drive, and we want to click on the little CD next to it, and we want to select a disk. So we're going to choose a disk file, which is a virtual optical disk, which is the ISO file that we downloaded earlier from Ubuntu. So we're going to select that and click open. You can see that it's now mounted it, and that's what we're going to boot from in order for the Ubuntu system to be installed on our virtual machine. We'll click OK, and once we've clicked OK, we'll click start, and we should be good to go. Clicking start should launch the virtual machine, and then we need to go through the install process for the install media. At this stage, the installation process goes through and checks or verifies the install media to make sure that you don't have any corruptions before the commencement of the install. So just let it run. It won't take too long, and at least you'll have some confidence that your install media is sane. Okay, so you can see it's booted up, and we should see the install wizard very shortly. So we're given two options. We can either try Ubuntu, that'll take us through to what's called a live environment, where we have a standard desktop environment to try it out and see what we think. But in this instance, we actually want to click the install Ubuntu because we want to install it. We're going to stay with the defaults at this stage. The type of keyboard layout that we're going to use is English US. We'll stay with the defaults. Again, we'll stay with the defaults. We'll have a normal installation. It will give us a standard desktop environment with a web browser and a few other bits and pieces. Don't touch anything, just click continue. Okay, so we're presented with another screen about the installation type that we want. So we've got the option to erase the disk and install Ubuntu, which is what we want, because we've just installed, or we've just created a brand new virtual disk and it has nothing on there, so we're going to just erase and install. We don't want to do something else, we'll just stay with the installation defaults. Again, we get the final warning. Is it what we really want to do? Yes, it is. Need to select the location that we're in. In this instance, I'll select Perth. I need to create a user account, so I'll create my user account and provide a password. And it's up to you whether you choose to log in automatically or require a password. It's neither here nor there. If you're using it just for lab work, it won't make a difference. And now the installer should just go on automatically until it completes the install. Okay, so the installation is now complete and it's asking us to restart, so we'll restart now. So it says please remove the installation medium, then press enter. So we will go to device, optical drive, remove disk from virtual drive, which it's already been done, and then we'll press enter rather. So this is the user that we created as part of the installation. We can click or press enter and we'll put in the password that we entered at installation time. It's valid to note that there is no concept of a root user per se with Ubuntu. That's not to say that there isn't a root, but you cannot log in as root user directly in Ubuntu. You need to escalate your privileges to root from a non-privileged user. So it wants you to connect online accounts, skip, 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 and just keep clicking next until you get through to the end. For our purposes, they won't really mean much to us. So that's the basic installation. We're not completed yet. We actually now need to install the paravirtual drivers, or the actual special drivers that allow the Ubuntu operating system to talk directly to our host hardware. And this is done by the installation of virtualization guest drivers. So this is now the process of how we go about that. The first thing we want to do is open a terminal. So we'll click the little show applications checkered box down there, and then we'll start typing terminal and we'll find the application terminal. That'll bring us to the xterm, and this is where we ascend to root. So we type in the command sudo space su, and now it's going to ask our password for, in our case, the Darren account, which is the non-privileged user account. So we'll enter our default password. Let me try that again. And there we go. We've ascended to root, and we can check that out by typing who am I, and we've confirmed that we're root. So now what we want to do is we want to update our packages. So we need to install a couple more packages in order to install the virtualization drivers. So they are apt install, so it's called build essential, and the other one is module assistant. We'll answer yes. That installs all the compile time and compilers, etc., utilities needed to install the virtualization drivers. Okay, with that complete, the first thing we need to do is run modular system, which is m-a, and we want to type in prepare. That sets up a bunch of links to our kernel headers. Once that's completed, you can see the symlinks were created. Now we want to install the guest editions CD image. That's where we get the drivers from, and that will actually install in our we want you to hit cancel because we'll navigate to it. So that'll install our CD-ROM, and we can see that it's installed there, and we can click on it and we can navigate to it. But we're going to navigate in the terminal, go back to the terminal, and we root. We want to be root for this. So in Ubuntu, all media gets installed under media, and you can see because I logged in as Darren, that it's mounted as Darren. So we want to navigate to the Darren directory, and we can tell that's a directory by doing a long listing of the directory, ls-l. The D there stipulates that it's a directory, so we'll navigate into that directory, and then we can see there's another directory called vbox, GAs, etc. And in that directory we have all of the virtualization drivers for the various platforms that we can do the installations for. The one I'm interested in is this one, vbox linux editions.run. So I'm going to do a /, which means run here, and I want to copy and paste and press enter. And all being fair and equal, it should just do its own thing. So it's going off and compiling all the various modules to insert into the kernel, which will allow the guest or Ubuntu to talk directly to the host, our Windows or whatever we're installing on, allow it to talk to the hardware directly. Okay, that's completed. It seems to have completed successfully. So now we'll actually restart the system to load those kernel modules. So you just type reboot as root, type reboot, and it will just reboot that system. Once the reboot has been complete, log into it again. You can see in the background that it's now gone KVM paravirtualisation, which means it's talking directly to the hardware, which is good. And when we now expand our little console box, the desktop, the drivers are now Virtualbox specific, and they know to resize. So I can now resize my desktop to any size that I like, and it just works seamlessly. Okay, that's pretty much it. So this brings this video tutorial to an end. If you've got any queries or questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Alright, thanks for your time.